when you give a hug to someone who has advanced leprosy, I would highly recommend it if you can ever give a good hug to someone with advanced leprosy, that it'll be good for your soul.
This is the L3 Leadership Podcast, episode number 152. What's up, everyone, and welcome to episode number 152 of the L3 Leadership Podcast. My name's Doug Smith, and I'm the founder of L3 Leadership. We're a leadership development company devoted to helping you become the best leader that you can be. In this episode, you're going to get to hear a talk that was given by Dr. Jim Withers, founder of Operation Safety Net, at one of our L3 Leadership breakfasts. And in his talk, he shares his story and the leadership lessons that he's learned along the way. Jim's often referred to as the homeless doctor because he actually is a doctor who dresses up as a homeless person and actually goes out and administers and treats the homeless under bridges, which is incredible. And I know that this talk is really going to challenge you. And if you enjoy the talk, you can also listen to our Q&A with Jim in episode number 153. And I highly encourage you to listen to both. If you're new to this podcast is intended to help you grow your leadership skills. And we're committed to bringing you 3 or 4 episodes every month to help you do that. One will always be a talk from our breakfast. One will be an interview that we do with a high-level leader. And then once a month, you'll get a personal leadership lesson by me. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, it would mean the world to us if you would subscribe and leave a rating and review on iTunes. It really does make a difference in getting the word out about the podcast. So thank you in advance for that. I want to thank our sponsors, Henny Jewelers. Henny Jewelers are a jeweler owned by my friend and mentor, John Henny. My wife and I got our engagement and wedding rings through Henny Jewelers, and they're just an incredible company. Not only do they have great jewelry, but they also invest in people. John gave Laura and I a book to help us prepare for our marriage, and he's been investing in me as a leader and a husband and a father now for many years, and I'm just so appreciative of him. Again, great organization. If you're in need of a good jeweler, check out hennyjewelers.com. I want to thank our other sponsors, Alex 2 Land and Real Estate Resources. Alex is a full-time realtor at Keller Williams Realty, whose team is committed to providing clients with highly effective premier real estate experiences throughout the greater Pittsburgh region. He's a member and a supporter of L3 Leadership, and he'd love the opportunity to connect with you. You can learn more about Alex and the work that he does at pittsburghpropertyshowcase.com. With that being said, let's jump right into Jim's talk. A little bit more about Jim. In 1992, he started dressing up as a homeless person and actually going out and treating the homeless under bridges as a doctor, which is just incredible. So he started at that time practicing street ministry, and since then has created a worldwide movement of street medicine where people do this all over the world, and he's literally changing the entire world on a daily basis. He's given a TED Talk. He was recently recognized as one of CNN's heroes. He's just an incredible leader, very humble, down to earth, and he leads by example. I love this man. I loved his talk. Enjoy it, and I'll be back at the end with a few announcements.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I don't speak as loud as you do, apparently. Can you all hear me? No, turn it up. Okay. So I thoroughly appreciate this invitation and the concept of leadership development. And kind of ironically, as I was getting ready for this, I realized I don't usually speak straight to the heart of leadership. My talk is generally more for medical folks or communities to think about the services and who's getting them and who's not. But I think that does connect with leadership, and I'm hoping that if I kind of walk through my usual talk here and with the discussion, that some of these things that are really important to me will come out, and then I will be able to maybe pick your all brains about your thoughts on leadership, because I know you're not here randomly, that you're all have a heart for making this world a better place and developing leadership in that regard. So this is an earlier version of me here. I want you to kind of look at that body language, which in this picture, it happens to be me, but I have seen this many, many, many times in my career, and I'll come back to that basic image. What is happening here is really interesting. There's this guy. His name is Old John. That's how we knew him on the street. And we're washing his feet because they needed it, and there were some other medical issues there that could be better addressed that way. John was really interesting because when I started working on the street, a lot of the guys and women out there, particularly the guys, were a little bit too proud to really directly ask for help. And yet, because a lot of pride, a lot of, awkwardness about beginning to do medical work with folks who hadn't been used to anyone caring about them, and they've been through a lot of trauma. But what they could do is they began saying, Doc, I'm okay, but you better look, Eva doesn't look too good, or old John, you should check on him. So old John actually probably didn't realize it, but he was really bonding us and the folks on the street together because we could all care about him. So it was really interesting how indirectly serving his needs made us more of a street community. To talk about leadership, I think you almost invariably have to talk about your childhood, how you were raised and those sorts of things. So I have to always, give credit to my dad. This is the real Dr. Withers, Donald Withers, who was a country doctor. I grew up in York County, Pennsylvania, rural Pennsylvania, and he would take me with him. I didn't take this picture, but he would take me with him on rounds and house calls in his little VW. We'd go up into the hills of Pennsylvania, and we would visit people. And there was something about the way that he related to the folks that were in need that even as a kid really impressed me. They'd give him a cup of coffee, they'd give me a glass of milk, and I could see that my dad was doing important medical things, but I could also sense that the people that he went to visit were enormously grateful, and there was a lot of love between my dad and these folks. And so, those experiences really had a big impact on me. I forgot, I added this one. He later told me that one of his influences was this Life magazine article that he read when he was young, which portrayed a day in the life of a country doctor. And actually, that could be my dad there in many ways, had the same black doctor's bag. And that, even though he was academically very good, he went to Washington U, this is what he wanted to be. He wanted to be a doctor that went to where people were. My mom, equally important to me, this is her in the lights are a little bright, but in the blue jeans jacket here, holding the young person that my dad's examining. And I was running around in the background here. So as a family, we did medical work in Nicaragua, Guatemala, St. Lucia. And for me, that was normal. Families did that. You went and you served people wherever they were. And it was these experiences actually that really made me feel like I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be in the healing field. This is my dad making horse calls in the highlands of Guatemala. And then as I was looking at these pictures, I realized this is that same article. Here's that doctor making house calls in his practice in rural Colorado. This is me on the right here, my first mission trip with my cool black shorts. And my brother's there. The other kids are actually missionary kids. And then Luis, a little friend that I made in Nicaragua. So this a long time ago, but these are some of the formative things that I went through. In medical school, I had this hankering to get back overseas to immerse myself in that kind of experience. And I had an incredible couple months in India, South India, in Mysore, and I saw stuff that you'd never see in this country. And one of the groups, of course, that had a huge impact on me were folks with leprosy, advanced leprosy. And we would make rounds from one part of the hospital campus to another. And my favorite was when we walked, over to the leprosy unit. And what really impressed me, I was fascinated with the disease and some of the corrective surgeries and things that they were doing. But it was the human thing. When you give a hug to someone who has advanced leprosy, I would highly recommend it if you can ever give a good hug to someone with advanced leprosy, that it'll be good for your soul, because there's so much love and gratitude that comes from a person who's been stigmatized and excluded really from society. I don't think it's any mystery why in the Bible, leprosy was such a important point in so many of the stories, because the sense of not being one of us, of having something ugly and shameful about you, really is a very, very, very deep experience. It's way more than, Mycobacterium leprae. It's a state, a social state as well. So those folks were just a huge influence on me. The other group of people that had a big impact on me were women that were coming into the hospital, and they were burned. They would come into the hospital, and their bodies would be burned, and they were so forlorn. They would lay in the bed. No one would visit them. They would stare at the ceiling, and often they would die. And after a while, I began to seeing these women, and I asked my supervising doctor there, what's going on? And he said, well, it's the stoves and the saris. It's very dangerous. The saris catch on fire. So for a couple days, I was going to invent a stove that was safe, and these women wouldn't have to die. But I asked around, which is always a good thing to do, and people said, no. It's the husband's families. They're asking for more dowry money, and if they don't get it, then they throw kerosene on the women and they burn them. So I was shocked and saddened, and I thought about how awful it is to be in a reality that is so hopeless, where no one, they believe no one cares, and nothing can be done. And it was underscored by the fact that my so-called teacher, I had some wonderful teachers over there, mostly surgeons, but this medicine guy was lying to me. I don't know if you know the Star Wars movie. These are not the drones you're looking for. It was kind of like, this is not the reality that we deal with. And that offended me, that there was a sense that the reality of the people we were trying to work with was not relevant. I was literally being taught that reality, their reality doesn't matter. And I saw this everywhere. And I think it was because of the amazing childhood I had. I don't know if any of you are skiers, but Pennsylvania skiers, if you ever go down and you're on some good snow and then suddenly you hit like soft snow or mushy snow, you almost fall off because you hit this. It was like that. It was like moving really quickly and then hitting med school and residency, and suddenly this invisible obstruction was there because it was a culture that was affected by things that for me were not why I wanted to go into medicine. So I spent the rest of my career, I think, trying to deal with that experience where I had my idealism, and then I hit the system. I hit the actual practice. And I think, kids, my own kids, young folks, they hopefully come up with a sense that, there's so much possible, and what you believe and what you observe is important. And then society, in many ways, for many reasons, tells them that's not what we do. That's not our reality. Learn to ignore those people. Learn to judge them from a distance, because it's a lot more convenient to shame and blame people than to actually deal with reality. Reality is tough, but it's so satisfying, even if it's a difficult reality, to deal with it. So I guess that's more or less the bullseye of my passion, is a call to not pretend like things are good. See how difficult they are, and then embrace the deeper issues, rather than just think about billing, profit, what you're afraid of getting sued for, what we've always done, who we've always treated, and a lot of assumptions about people that we don't really know because we never walked in their shoes. So as a medical educator, I got this passion to be involved in teaching. I was a chief resident at Mercy Hospital here. And at that point, I decided to give myself to practice, and it needed to be in an arena where there was service. But I just loved the concept of doing all that with young people and thinking through it and teaching. So teaching has been the center of my life. So here I am, and I think the person who took this was a medical resident that I took with me to Belize, and we're working in the jungles. And this was an attempt to broaden the scale of experiences that our residents would have, to be in someone else's world. Another thing that I was doing around the same time was developing a community rotation, where I would try to get my residents and students with me into the Pittsburgh community outside of the hospital. And so I recognized that Light of Life Shelter was one of the few that didn't have a medical clinic. So I talked to them. I said, you guys should have a medical clinic. And they immediately said, yeah, you should be the medical director. And that really took me back, and I realized, I guess they're right. I guess I should be. So they gave us some space there in the basement for about 10 years. We had a nice shoulder clinic there, which was really great. One of the things I loved about working there versus what I was doing at that time under the bridges was I saw people at a moment where they'd been through a lot, usually hell, and they had come to a place where they were ready to make changes. And just the smallest amount of affirmation about the strength that we would see in someone at that time, or that someone could be proud of them. It was like those lepers. It was really, really fascinating to me. So I enjoyed those years working there, because it was a really unique window, and a lot of good things continue to happen there. So I'm grateful for their work. But I came back from these trips, and I realized, you know what? There's no accountability here in my own hospital. They don't mind if I go off and treat people in another country. But what I really wanted to do was to challenge myself and the people around me to look at the people right in front of us or in our own community and see if we were treating them as we would want to be treated, really seeing their reality. And so I got involved with domestic violence work. That was my late 80s career passion. And the more I looked, the more I saw domestic violence everywhere. When I asked my peers about it, they said, I don't think we have that problem here. And if it was recognized, they would do a now familiar kind of a song and dance, and they would say, well, it's mostly women. They seem to go back to the person that's abusing them, so they must want to be abused. That's what they want. And so there was a lot of shaming and blaming and pushing off, which now, at this point, I was beginning to recognize almost diagnostically as a sign that they didn't want to deal with it. So you'd hear things like, well, that problem doesn't exist, and it's not my job. And you think, well, how could it be both? I mean, either it doesn't exist, end of story, or it does exist and you don't want to deal with it. But that kind of reaction, I began to, basically the health system became my more fascinating patient. And again, this idea that we had a powerful system, but it had tunnel vision to an extreme degree. It's sort of like, Arnold Schwarzenegger, if the hospital system, if you want it to do this, the hospital's great at that. But if you want to scratch their back, it can't reach it anymore because they're muscle bound. And so the health system had lost its ability to be nimble and to deal with the people's needs. And that could be a heroin addict coming out of a crack house, or it could be a bank president. Nobody gets listened to the way they should. So this transcends, the issues just of poverty. It's a way of being servant to the people that we serve. So I decided I needed a local classroom because I wanted local accountability for this thing that I was raised to be the core of what I believed. And I wanted people that were what I would now call excluded. They weren't user-friendly. They didn't really fit the mold. And were not treated well and weren't getting services. And then the third thing I wanted, very particularly, is I wanted the most ornery people that I could find. I didn't want anybody who would just bow to my will and do what I wanted. If I was going to learn something, and if I could teach something, I wanted folks who I had to take everything I knew and bring it to them and say, let's make this work for you. You call that concierge medicine if they were millionaires, but it's the idea that the person is central, their reality is central, and we're actually going to fully explore the reality of someone else. Now that's a little utopian for sure. And if you come in saying, well, I'm going to fix all that, then you also have the wrong attitude. Healthcare has been trying to move towards a position of, we're not gods anymore. We never were. But we don't want to pretend like we're the Wizard of Oz. We can do everything. We need to partner with people to let their own strengths emerge and be part of their own journey, but that we can help them. We can be there for them. So it's flipping the script all the way around. And I thought the only way to really learn this is to go as far out there to the sheep that's as far away, the one sheep, and work with that one. And from that position, learn from them how to solve problems with people. So I thought, who could I work with in Pittsburgh who was really the lepers, really, of this city? And I thought of the folks that were under the bridges. We have a lot of bridges. We have more bridges than any city in the world, actually. And so it was a natural fit. Again, just to reemphasize this idea that there was a reality gap. And for me, what is the path that can take you? What's the class that can teach you this journey? Because we knew how to work with renal physiology, drug-resistant germs and hemodynamics, but connecting with reality was a missing classroom. And so I thought, I needed this. I needed the people who were under the bridges. They might need me, who knows, but I needed them for sure. So how do you connect with people who are so disaffiliated and disconnected? You need coffee. No. I'd seen in the highlands of Guatemala and places how the people there and my parents had gotten to know who was respected in the community and worked with them. When I worked with domestic violence, I ended up going to the Women's Center because nobody in my peer group knew anything about it, and formed a partnership with their organization, which was good. And so I thought, I've got to find someone who's been there. And so I began to ask around, look around, until eventually I found Mike. I don't know if any of you know Mike, but Mike was homeless for 7 years and had run away from home. He'd come back And he was an amazing guitarist. He had played, I think, for a gig at the Salvation Army just to make some money, and he'd seen the work that they were doing, so he got involved in outreach with them. So he was doing outreach, but he chose not to go to the sites, but to go under bridges. So for about 6 years before I met him, Mike was taking blankets and sandwiches out to street folks. And so I finally tagged him down at the St. Joe's meetings that they had on homelessness up in the hill. And I said, I'm a doctor. I heard what you do. Could you take me with you? And he said, well, they don't like doctors out there. And I said, well, I can imagine. But I really want to do this. And I think it's really important that someone sees the people out there. So he goes, all right, I'll take you along on 2 conditions. And I quote, you don't dress like a doctor. You don't act like an asshole. Those were Mike's 2 rules. So I went to the church library and I thought, is there a book on this? And there was one. And the first book I ever read on homeless care was called 52 Ways to Help the Homeless. And in it was a chapter that said, consider dressing like a homeless person if you want to meet the homeless. And so there's a recipe in there for putting dirt in your hair and all this stuff. And I thought, well, this is kind of fortuitous. So here I'm in the backyard, putting dirt on my clothes and stuff. And my 3 little boys at the time come out and they said, ooh, Daddy, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm going to go visit people that don't have homes. They sleep under bridges. And they quite innocently said, well, why not? And I said, I don't know yet. Can we come along? And I said, well, not yet. So I showed up, and a little dirtier than this one, but, there I was. And Mike said, well, you got the look. We'll see if you can keep up. Now, Mike was really protective of the street folks. He would not suffer anybody who didn't respect them first, which is perfect for me. And the thing I like about this picture is that my bag is very empty and my ears are very big. I was listening more than I was doing. And I think that was a really good place to start. We're trespassing here down near the train station. So, the streets. It really was quite a plunge for me. I didn't tell the hospital. I didn't tell my malpractice carrier. I thought, man, this is a pilot. And so maybe later I can explain what I'm doing. And Mike introduced me to the people. They trusted him. And if I was okay, then Mike said so, then I was okay. And it didn't take long before, I got to be known as Doc Jim. And it was a fascinating moment. I think to kind of maybe try to connect with this breakfast, there are moments. Have you ever read about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey? It's a very interesting concept. Joseph Campbell wrote a book, something like The Hero's Quest. But he took all the mythology of the world and broke it down to some basic archetypes. And one of the stories that's the most common is The Hero's Quest. It's basically The Hobbit, the protagonist is in a village where everything's the way it's always been and is challenged by something that they see that calls them to go beyond where they are. Usually there's a bit of hesitancy or resistance, and something forces that decision. And so the Hobbit or whoever, there's so many versions of this, has to make the choice and goes outside of the village on a quest. There's a lot of criticism by the rest of the villagers. You can't do that. Those people are not good. They brought it on themselves. You'll be killed. You'll see. And but the protagonist has to do it for some reason, and makes that leap and crosses that boundary and goes into the realm of the other. On that journey, they meet classically helpful wizards and dangerous trolls and things like that. And they have to, in the process, have faith to keep going forward. And as they do, they're helped, usually almost miraculously, and they have to learn new lessons to survive. And as a process, eventually there's usually a crisis where you have to fight the dragon, and then you get the prize, which often is wisdom or insight, and you bring it back to the village, and then the village either accepts it or not. But that's kind of the archetype, and I found myself living that. And as leaders, I think you're gonna have that experience as well. To put it maybe in a Christian context, I mean, Christ had his own. He's the ultimate hero, and his journey to those people, to be with people that everyone judged and criticized, his courage to go against the norms of the Pharisees, etc., was a really very profound example of doing the right thing and taking it to a level that teaches us, lessons that are beyond business as usual. Anyway, I do tend to digress. So here I was in a new place. What I realized was there are lots of people out there that some folks said, I think I saw some kind of a statement back in the early 90s that we didn't have any street people, or not really. There's like 6. And I realized, well, there's a lot more than that. And they were everywhere, under bridges and nooks and crannies, hiding, trying to survive. Many of them had medical problems, which were third world and overwhelming. Now, I also, in going back to the Joseph Campbell hero kind of thing, I'd been prepared, unbeknownst to me, to do this, not just by my childhood, but I had a passion for mountaineering. And so I used to do mountaineering instruction, and I learned how to do wilderness medicine. And I used to think, it's so selfish. I'm using all my time and effort, and I'm learning how to do this stuff with backpacks full of medicine, and it's not really helping anyone but a couple, wealthy, semi-wealthy mountaineers that are risking their lives foolishly to go do something in another country. And suddenly here I thought, wow, I know how to put medicines in a backpack. And this is another one of those kind of things that gave me a sense that maybe this was more than just an accident. So this picture to me says a lot. It shows that intersection of health and homelessness. There's a book you might want to read about the homeless experience. It was written by a great writer, Jack London, who wrote Call of the Wild. He went undercover as a homeless person in 1905, I think, on the streets of London, and wrote from that perspective. And the exhaustion is what reminds me of that book, never having a place to rest. The other thing about this picture that I find compelling is the guy with his back turned and the pigeons. When you start working with those people, whoever they are, that most of us have judged, then the crowd gets angry at you. They get upset. And you're going against the grain. So that's a leader's moment. You have to face that and deal with that judgment that you're getting. We don't do it that way. Those people, they'll sue you. They'll kill you. You're enabling them. You're making them worse. So it's like saying you're feeding the pigeons. If you keep feeding the pigeons, they're just going to keep coming. So sometimes I'll say to someone who gives me that, I'll say, yeah, it's true. Sisters of Mercy they cause homelessness. They make us our sandwiches up there in the nunnery, And they give it to us, and we give the people sandwiches. And those sandwiches are so good that people are leaving their house to sleep in the snow. It's true. That's the kind of thinking you can have from a distance. When you get closer to people, you begin to see the details, the granular aspects and the humanity of each person. And like the domestic violence victims that I had gotten to know, I began to not just see the failure, but the strength in someone who can endure what they're going through. So it's a strength-based way of looking at people. And I began to see people on the street not as bums, but as people who were just surviving the day, getting through it, doing the best that they could under really bad circumstances. It's a good picture, but oh, there it is. I got it. So I got to know each person and some of their stories and how they had to survive. This is Tracy. This is actually a professional photo here from a newspaper article. I love how the little girl is trying to figure out. She's seeing the woman that no one else is seeing there. And if she knew who that woman was, I don't know what she'd think. But Tracy actually drowned. She had a tough life. And Gypsy and Cliff, and I won't name the other because she's still alive. I got to know these people. And many of them, had destructive situations, but they were surviving. It occurred to me for folks like this that it was kind of like people who had been in a storm and their boat had been destroyed, and there was a little log or something, a piece of board that they had managed to grab a hold of. And clinging to it to not drown, they'd gotten through the storm. And that had been everything to them. When the seas calmed a little bit, perhaps a boat came by and said, "Oh, come swim over here. You'll be safe." But for that person, this is all they could think of, was, I can just survive by hanging on to this piece of board. And a lot of people find themselves in a place like that. They don't have that sense that anybody's going to be there for them, that they're going to be there for themselves. And so those changes are really, really difficult for them. And so they're stuck in that moment and shouldn't be judged because we didn't know how bad that storm was for them. So I feel like the only way to, more punishment is not going to help folks like that. You can't have tougher love because they've already been raped and beaten and molested as kids and all kinds of stuff. And shamed. And many of them had ingrained their own failures into self-hate. It's almost like an autoimmune disease where if your experiences of yourself are bad enough, you begin to sort of attack yourself, and it becomes like an autoimmune process. So it was more than a medical journey. I guess I'm trying to get at here the plunge into the streets, and it's probably a good thing that I didn't tell the hospital or anyone what I was doing because I needed a lot of time to process the fact that I really was in a different reality that I didn't know much about. And thank goodness for Mike. Thank goodness for the people on the street that were willing to put up with me. I began to be known as Doc Jim, and people began to refer me to other Brits. It's like my practice built really quickly because they would say, "I'm okay, but you got to see so and so," and so pretty soon I was known on the street. And people were very bitter. People were very bitter about the medical world. They said they treat you like crap. Usually their language is a little stronger. But I'd rather die than be treated like that. And so you saw this anger. And sometimes I felt like an emotional punching bag because, here I was like the cowboy that went into the Indian camp or vice versa that actually wanted to make peace. And then the other group said, there's one of them, and I had that experience with domestic violence because, white male doctors didn't have a good reputation for being very sensitive to people who suffered domestic violence. But I found myself immersed, and at the same time that people were angry, they would break down crying when they realized that I was really a doctor and I really wanted to help. So it was a sacred moment many times to be with people by a campfire and have them just say, I can't believe someone actually cares that we're still alive. And that shock, went right back to the leprosy and all those other things. And it just touched me that, we do a lot of medical research here. We do a lot of incredible medical work, but we have not done much at all on the human front about caring about reality, about the reality of others. And so I knew I was onto something really important, and I couldn't turn my back on it. I used to lay at night and listen to the rain on the roof and say, ooh, I like that. And now I was thinking about, a 70-year-old woman curled up next to a dumpster that I knew. It was very inconvenient to actually know what was going on with people. But I was embraced, and I got so much kindness from people in the street. Pretty soon I had to, I had to begin to develop a way of doing this. So the outreach phase of this is getting to know the people on the street. It's getting to know who you are. What the heck is a street doctor? How do you explain that to yourself or someone else or the police? Am I using my time? Okay, we're going to go really fast now. So I developed ways of, thanks for the heads up, ways of putting a backpack together and delivering care and systematizing it. I didn't have a name for the activity. I now call it street medicine, but it was the delivery of medical care directly to people on the bridges. Here I'm writing a note saying, connecting someone. The note probably says something like, Bob, I talked to your doctor. He says he'll see you Thursday at 2:00. So suddenly, we're a home care service for people under bridges. And I thought, wow, this is really great. And then the idea that you could have a service that knew people and any homeless person could call at 3 a.m. and say, I don't feel good, doc. I'm afraid. And then any ER could call at 4 a.m. and say, we got this guy. He has a mohawk. He won't give us his real name. He says it's Spike. Oh, Spike's allergic to penicillin. Oh, okay. We did this. I don't think he understands. No problem. We're working on insurance. We'll get him his meds tomorrow, and we'll try to get him to the follow-up clinic. I mean, to me, that was in the leadership journey, that was one of those epiphany moments when I thought, oh, I see something. I see a system of care. It's like a fire department or something. This could really, really help everybody. And we began to see folks that had not been looked at well in the hospital. We got ourselves an office. We became official in 93, Operation Safety Net. I decided not to start my own nonprofit, but to put it under the Sisters of Mercy because their structure was one I trusted and one that was more stable, and I wanted to keep my job. I told the malpractice carrier, told the hospital, everything worked out. We were able to get a staff to support a larger volunteer pool. We developed electronic records back in 92, way before the hospital did. And nowadays, we're what I'd call a level 3 street medicine program. I had to make up all this stuff. I had to make up a name for it. I had to develop levels for it. So this is Dave, and I took this picture of him when he was treating, and I can use his name, Roberto. When Roberto was at his lowest point, And, oh, darn it, I didn't put that picture in. I had a picture of, Roberto's now an employee of ours, and he does great outreach. Here's one of our social workers in a camp. So we began taking services directly to the people, not just medical, but social, and tying it all together. As I had done with domestic violence, I created a consult service for the hospital so that the hospital would have the capacity to deal with folks and they could see them. They didn't have to pretend like they didn't exist. In other cities, we've shown a reduced hospitalization, ER utilization, length of stay. It really saves a lot of money to have one of these. This is not a good discharge plan. We created things like the severe weather shelter when the capacity of the regular shelters was full. It was minus 20 when we started it here for 11 nights, and it saved a lot of lives. And then students have continue to be, for me, one of the best ways to improve the future, particularly the one in the middle that is now Dr. Christopher Withers. He was one of those 3 little boys that saw me putting dirt in my hair. But it's a great classroom. It's very fluid. It's reality-based. And I think it is significant way beyond just the homeless situation in the way of looking at those people who are left out. These are some of the medical schools that now have street medicine. We do housing. We've housed over 1,500 people in their own apartments and now other settings that we've developed. But there's still people that are lost, like Froggy here. I took this picture because I knew he was going to die, and he did. And this picture of Bill, I asked him if I could take a picture, and he said, nope. And I said, why? He said, well, I've been in your office. Everybody on the wall's dead. So I said, well, I just really want a picture. So he let me take it, and he died a week after this picture, and his face is now in my office. But it really made me angry that these people were dying and no one was remembering them. So I got a check from Sidney Sheldon, the writer. He said, you should be cloned. And he gave me $1,000. And I said, Mike, we're going to buy plaques. We could afford 10 at that time. And it's going to say we remember. And then the name or nickname and the year they died. We went back to 92. And we're going to put them wherever someone died. If it's under a bridge nobody sees, that's where it'll go. If it's right next to City Hall, that's what we're going to do. And so we went out, and the police told us we couldn't do that. So we talked to the mayor, and he gave us a wall, which is down at the end of Grant Street here. And it's a memorial wall. And I know you've attended those memorial services. We have a candlelight service every December 21st where we remember those that we lost. This past year, we had a moment that was really special. One of the guys died in the camp, and his camp buddies from the camp came. And this is a moment where they all put their hands on the first time they saw his name, and they're all just crying and acknowledging. So really, it's a moment to recognize the humanity of people. I have overused my time, but I'm going to take a tiny bit more to talk about the movement. So back in 93, I knew I didn't want to turn my back on this. I couldn't. But I didn't know anyone else doing this. And I heard about a doctor in Calcutta. I was in India for other reasons. And I went up to Calcutta and I met Jack Prager. And when I saw how he worked on the streets with people, I said, wow, we're from the same planet. Very important to have people on your path that you can recognize. And it was another epiphany. And I said, this is a field of medicine. It just doesn't have a name yet. So I've dedicated my time since 93 to talking anywhere I'm invited, going anywhere I'm asked, helping any community that can start a program to do it. And I've learned, a lot of it's on my vacation time, but I have continued to push that. And so now we have partners in Cleveland and Boston, and this is a new one in Columbus. This is after the Katrina in New Orleans. The young man here was an outreach worker. He's now in medical school after working with me. So there's a street medicine program in New Orleans. In Copenhagen, this young lady, I was rounding with her in Prague. She started a street medicine program in the Czech Republic. She translated my little manual into Czech, and now it's all throughout the Czech Republic. This is from a student who came from Nigeria to work with me, who started a program there. And so we decided to have an annual meeting. We had our first one here in Pittsburgh. I thought, how do you get people together? How do we move this to the next level? We need to meet. I didn't want to have a McDonald's because that wasn't the way this was going to spread. Let's just bring them together. So we've had an annual meeting, the first one here in Pittsburgh, and it brings people from now 6 continents together every year to meet and talk about how to do this better. We even have a period where we go out and we actually take care of homeless people during the conference. We have student groups. We have like 25 student posters. They compete for these. Speakers from all over the world. And these are some of the places that now do street medicine. There's actually a lot more in the States than this. So this is a long way from putting dirt in my hair. And I felt sometimes it was like bicycling down a ski slope. You just have to keep pedaling. But it's been a journey that has given me a great amount of faith. It's strengthened my faith. It's been a fishes and loaves to the nth power. And I feel really blessed by it. We have our next meeting in Allentown. Last one was in Geneva, but Allentown's going to be great. And we started the Street Medicine Institute in 2009 to give this hall a home, take it to the next level. This is my homage to the nuns. That's our street medicine website. And I appreciate your patience. I think I like you so much. That's why I got so granular on some of that stuff. But I'd be happy now. Lois says thanks, and so do I. So I'm happy to do whatever you want. Thanks.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to Dr. Withers talk. If you'd like to connect with him and what he's doing at Operation Safety Net, you can go to l3leadership.org/episode 152. Again, you can also listen to our question and answer with him in episode 153. And if you want, I interviewed him personally in episode number 56 of the L3 Leadership Podcast. So if you want to learn more from Dr. Jim, check out episodes 153 and 56. I also want to let you know that we recently introduced L3 Leadership membership. You can now become a member of L3 Leadership for just $25 a month. You'll be able to attend our breakfast events for free. You'll have access to joining a membership site that is filled with member-only content, resources, and courses to help you grow your leadership to the next level. And you also have the ability to join a mastermind group and so much more. If you'd like more information on becoming a member, go to l3leadership.org/membership. I want to thank our other sponsor, BAB Inc. They're an insurance broker, third-party administrator, and consulting firm based out of Pittsburgh, but they do business all over the world. And they're led by my friend, Russell Livingston, and he has a huge passion for developing next-generation leaders, which is why he hosts our monthly leadership breakfast. And so if your organization has any insurance needs, I encourage you to check out BAB Inc. at babbins.com. That's BABBINS.com. Lastly, if you want to stay in touch with everything that we're doing here at L3 Leadership, you can sign up for our email list on our website at l3leadership.org, and you'll get a free copy of my ebook, Making the Most of Mentoring, which is my step-by-step process for helping you get meetings with leaders. Again, if you enjoyed the talk, we'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe, leave a rating and review. It really helps us get the word out organically, and thanks for being a listener. We don't take that for granted. As always, I like to close with a quote, and Ed Glover recently said this. He's the founder of Urban Impact. He said, "Start doing what you know God is telling you to do, and you will see miracles." I love that. So what's God telling you to do? Just go start. Thanks for listening and being a part of L3 Leadership. Laura and I appreciate you so much, and we'll talk to you next episode.